Hello everyone and welcome to the One Clear Thing live stream. We'll discuss the edge computing and IoT from business and technical perspectives. I'm joined by the ClearBlades leadership team who will guide us and share their experience from real-life IoT deployments. But before I will ask you to ask your questions and start discussion, I would like to share my favorite insights from recorded episodes. So during our conversation with Eric Simoni, the CEO and co-founder of ClearBlade, he explained his vision and the business model. But he mentioned something very, very important. As a leader, you should empower your employees and support their creativity and initiative. I believe that philosophy is one of the core factors which made ClearBlade so successful today. Aaron Asbrook, the CTO and co-founder of ClearBlade, was responsible for making the vision reality. And trust me, that task is way more challenging than it may seem, even if you're an experienced IoT professional. Being a technical person myself, I enjoyed every conversation with Aaron. But what impressed me the most was his approach to validate and test existing solutions, adapt what works, and build the missing pieces in-house. I think that's a great mindset to have. And during the last episode, I met with Brent Chandler, the VP of Sales. So chatting about the technology is fun, but business demands solid operational framework. And Brent described his secret formula for success that I couldn't agree with more. Define a specific problem to address. Successfully address that problem, prove that you address it, and show the business value. I think that's a solid framework for operating business, any business, IoT included. Okay, that was a lot of talking, but we are here for you. So if you've got any questions and watch us live, please ask us in comments and ClearBlade experts will provide their insights for you. Eric, Aaron, Brent, it's a pleasure to be with you here.
Good to be back.
We can all do it together. Right?
Exactly. It's first time we are all in one place, which is very, very nice. So is there anything you'd like to share before we open the Q&A phase?
Yeah, just thank you. It's been a great series, and I'm looking forward to doing this live with my colleagues here, and hopefully our answers match to some degree.
Well, shout out to Brent too, who a lot of folks have come back and said his session was really great and pretty unique in this space. So Brent, congratulations! I got to go study up on how you ran.
I think it's because I didn't talk about tech at all.
Maybe. Well, funny enough, IoT is not about tech, right? I love technology, and I could chat with Aaron all day long. But at the end of the day, if we cannot provide any business value, then it is just not doing any good for anyone. So Brent, we need you to basically guide us and keep us on track and keep us focused on the business reality. So let's start with the critical question that is kind of technical, but also got a business angle to it. What's the difference between a message broker and fully featured IoT platform? Eric, if you could start the conversation.
Yeah, so a message broker is kind of the heartbeat of an IoT platform. It enables different devices, things to talk to one another reliably, even when they don't speak the same language or aren't always available at the same time. So it's a very, very important component of an IoT platform. But it's not the only component that's necessary for an IoT architecture. They're crucial for managing large amounts of data generated by connected devices like sensors, machines, and other smart objects. But in general, that broker's got to be made to scale. It's got to be made secure, and then it's got to work in concert with other pieces that are also very critical to drive an IoT application. And those are the pieces that we've brought together as part of what ClearBlade is.
I've seen Aaron nodding his head, so it looks like he wants to take over.
I mean, that's it exactly. A message broker has existed. I mean, shoot, but the moment my career began, there were message brokers in the ecosystem moving, Java message servers and all kinds of stuff. So it's not like a message broker is this some new thing that existed just because of IoT. There's some protocols that are kind of new that grew well with IoT that message brokers use. But ultimately, an IoT solution, it's got to serve users. It's got to process information. It's got to run rules. It's got to store data about your devices. And then it has to make sure the devices talk with the right policies. There's so much more to an IoT solution than what a message broker is going to do, which is going to receive a message, publish it out to somebody else to listen, right? Receiver, sender, receiver. So for me, when people try to say, well, I've got an IoT platform, I picked a broker, you haven't done anything yet. You haven't built the IoT solution. You haven't even given yourself the core elements to build an IoT solution, right? That's why, when you look at what the hyperscalers did, and even though they're pretty narrow, they still provide a ton of security, a ton of routing capability, a ton of built-in rule process. And that just begins, you have yet to build the APIs to serve your mobile apps or to take the right actions at the right times. So for me, they're dramatically different. So it's most likely every IoT platform has a message broker inside of it. It's also very true that there's many message brokers out there that don't even do anything to do with IoT along the way. It's just an element in what's happening inside of it.
Yes, I think that the message broker is just a single component of an IoT platform, and not every message broker is essentially the IoT platform. But let's go to Brent to save the day once again and share his business perspective on what the IoT broker is, and more importantly, what do your customers expect from IoT platform? Because business users don't really care about brokers, protocols, all that fun stuff, right? They just want to have the thing done. So what's the business definition of an IoT platform?
Well, I mean, as Aaron was describing, what we offer is a complete platform that has all of the components already pre-built that we can deliver to customers. So, we talk specifically about message brokers. Every one of our 250 plus customers is using Clearblade's message broker because it's part of the full featured offering that we have. So every single one of our customers uses it. They get some value out of it, and it varies depending upon what they're doing with the solution. But again, I think from a business perspective, Aaron hit on this. It's flexibility, and I will hit on flexibility regardless of kind of the topic that we're talking about, because that's one of the things that I think Clearblade is unmatched in. It's the flexibility, even if you just take it down to the messaging or the message broker or that component. It's got to be flexible enough to ingest any protocol. That's how you deliver value to the customer.
You mentioned flexibility, and actually, based on my experience, flexibility comes hand in hand with complexity. Because if you want to create a flexible solution that can provide whatever you might imagine to build on top of it, at the end of the day, it is not that easy to make use of that without spending hours of trying to learn how that works. So, Eric, you're the one that started the whole thing with the vision. So how can you manage the flexibility and complexity to basically work together instead of fighting each other?
Oh, great question. Well, from the outset, when Aaron and I discussed this, we wanted to give our customers the ability to use any cloud or on-prem or edge. So flexibility was built in from day one, right? I think the exact conversation I had with Aaron was let's build an IoT platform that can run anywhere, connect to any device, scale to millions of devices, and do it securely and integrate with enterprise systems. And Aaron's first comment was, "Oh, that's all you want? No problem." Not quite exactly, but it's just, again, I'm a former developer, so I'm one of those computer scientists that has seen this movement over the last few decades. And I started my career doing mainframe systems, and I watched us move to PCs, which the edge, that was the early days of edge, right? We weren't calling it edge, it was distributed computing. And then I watched the internet emerge, and I watched clouds emerge. And so having been through this pendulum swing gave me the experience to say, okay, this is coming. Cloud is great, but they're going to come back to the edge, and let's just let our customers choose where they want to run their workloads and make that as flexible as possible.
So basically, the battle between the edge computing or distributed computing and centralized, nowadays called cloud, right? This goes back and forth as we discussed during the episode. But I think we should try to utilize both, essentially to leverage cloud where it shines, but use the edge computing where we can really extract some extra value from getting that compute and storage directly where the data is generated. So, Aaron, over to you. How do you think about that cloud versus edge split? Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, I think you go back to the principle that Eric laid down, right? That gauntlet of I want the capability to build a full IoT solution and have it run, but then I want no constraints about where it runs, right? And that was a great founding principle for the world that we live in here 14 years later. That principle meant that we said, what are the core elements to build an IoT solution, right? Message broker was in there, but at no point did we say this message broker can't go and live and run somewhere else, right? So as the ecosystems evolved over the last few years, and actually our Edge product, it was the first Edge product in market because of this vision that Eric set forward, this idea that the whole stack now has to run. We were all enamored by Raspberry Pis, I think 10 years ago, right? That idea that you could get so much value out of a cheap computer sitting, that for us became what we saw as the edge. Let's see how we can put as much as possible and leverage that little bit of capital investment in that remote gateway, put and run the entire stack there, the rules, the visualizations, even the mobile app interface for APIs. Can that come off of that environment? And then as we swing back and forth, can we make these kind of normal constructs we understand about our IoT solution go between either, right? Can we move them back and forth? So that initial vision, again, go back to that. We will run anywhere. We will run that IoT solution. Once you build that as your principle, now we can leverage the cloud platforms and integrate with them. We can run on premise. We can run that stack in a building, or we can take it and run it all the way down to a small gateway device doing the full life cycle associated with it, right? And that vision, it's why we're the first edge to market. We're the first software edge product to space was ClearBlade's Edge. It looks a little different than the different directions people have gone because now we have remote data centers that are edges and all the way down to single embedded devices. But ultimately, we're providing, and we believe in Edge, is the ability to put the full application, the full stack of what you need in any location in that overall spectrum.
Yeah, so the capabilities, the hardware capabilities increased dramatically over those last 14 years that you said, right? So back in the days, the actual edge was very, very limited. And if you wanted to have a bit more flexibility, you had to basically install the huge server in a building, factory, or on a ship just to get things running. And now we can have the same compute power on those small devices. And even more importantly, those are very, very cheap devices nowadays. But going back to the customers, Brent, you meet with customers on daily basis with the executives, with people running huge enterprises. What is the current theme? Are there more cloud-oriented, edge-oriented? Maybe they struggle still to pick how to proceed. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, as Aaron mentioned, we were very early to edge. And historically, customers have been more focused on the cloud aspects of IoT deployments. But now with Edge AI, we're starting to see a shift to really a combination of both, right? Edge and cloud. I mean, the way that we look at it, the cloud is an important part of a deployment, but at the end of the day, it's a utility. So what is more important, and I'm going to say that word again, what is more important is that a customer goes with a solution that has the flexibility to meet whatever sort of cloud requirements they have, right? Whether it's they're using a single hyperscaler or they have a multi-cloud approach, or I mean, we have customers that for various reasons don't want to run in clouds at all and want to run their IoT solution completely disconnected from the internet. So having the flexibility to address all of those different requirements. And then as you start to look at what we're seeing on the edge, I mean, we've been doing edge with a lot of customers over the last several years. And there's customers that have seen significant business impact by deploying edge. I mean, we have a rail operator who deployed Edge pretty early on with us. And once they started running rules out on the edge, they immediately saw a 25% reduction in cellular costs, right? So right there, forget Edge AI. Once they were able to implement rules, they saw an immediate business impact.
I think that's a great point you made, that if we can shift that compute close to where the data is generated, then we can really see some huge savings in terms of the network cost, as you, Brent, just mentioned, right? This is very, very important. It's sometimes, the approach is a bit different, that we should pump as much data to the cloud as possible, and we will think what we are going to do it some other day, right? But then you receive your first bill, and the whole IoT use case does not add up at all. So I think this is a great command, and this is a great capability to be able to push as much as possible to the edge and extract the only attributes that you're really interested in and send those attributes up to the cloud. So going back to Eric, the one with the vision, Eric, you took a huge bet on the edge. Like a number of years ago, edge capabilities were not even near where we've got them right now. So
Yeah.
I would say that saying that the ClearBlade is the edge native, edge first solution, that's a huge bet.
Yeah, it's different. I don't know of another company whose edge and cloud distribution is identical, right? It's the same software on both ends of the line. And that's something that we invested in very early on. In essence, this is like an IoT operating system, right? We bound this with Linux, and it's a consistent software package that scales horizontally in the cloud and then runs at the edge. So it gives us a ton of advantages in terms of compatibility and scale. Gives us a ton of advantages around edge orchestration and a consistent software package that then can be customized. So it's to me, one of the key differentiators of ClearBlade is us being able to do this. Look, it's why, Brent mentioned it's why rail operators like ClearBlade, because they like consistent, repeatable packages that go out and monitor all sorts of things in the railway, railroad crossings and freight cars and blowers and also switches and all sorts of things. So we really love this dynamic set of customers that we have. We've got customers in all different verticals, yet our software remains the same. So really, it's a tip of the hat to the engineering team at ClearBlade, because it's easier from my perspective to set a vision. It's much harder to implement that vision and do it in a very advanced and unique way.
Well, that is true, that it is harder to implement than just point the direction. But on the flip side, if you've got a perfect engineering team that is basically doing some random development, they will not get you anywhere. So I'm not saying that Aaron have done a poor job. I'm just saying that I've got huge respect to all of you, because essentially every one of you got a bit different mindset and even a bit different goals, to be honest. But you made that work to achieve the state that we are at now. So
I think the key was for me to leave them alone, set the vision and step back and get out of Aaron's way. We had a good separation of concerns, I think. Again, being technical, I could try to dip in. And there are times when I probably asked too many questions and Aaron would go, I got it. But leave them alone, let them create, let them build, and then just focus on the business side. So it's worked out.
Before we continue this topic, we've got a question from Mari, and I believe this is a one to Aaron. So how does ClearBlade work with object storage? Could you give us some technical hints?
Yeah, I won't derail everything because I could talk for a little while. But if you go back to what we were talking about with what was an IoT platform, right? It's not just the message broker. It's persisting this data. It's storing the data. In IoT, you've got a ton of what I call hot data. This stuff is moving fast. You want to move it down the line. You want to give it to data scientists. You want to show it to somebody. You want to process it. And then you got a ton of other data you just want to throw and store for a while, right? You don't know when you're going to need it. The analytics team is going to go do something. So IoT is both a hot process life cycle, and it has a lot of cold life cycles. And somewhere in between exists the structured data, the object data, the file data. All of those are targets. So when Clearblade builds it in, we think, what is the kind of generic layer? And we do a lot of kind of structured data by default inside of us. But we don't preclude, nor do we limit where this data may go. So object storage, document storage, kind of whatever term you're doing, we provide some document style structures within ourselves, but we also integrate with the other data stores that are out there. So MongoDB Atlas comes to mind with object storage. There's multiple options out there. Each hyperscaler has them, whether you're maybe BigQuery or Bigtable, I forget, right? So we will actually stream that data. We have the direct connectors bi-directionally so that our hot data will land right in those environments. When somebody makes a request from a mobile app to know what a device information is going on, we can enrich it and hydrate it with data from object storage as well. So for us, it's a data feed into what is and a data integration point that we enable and empower and encourage, because you need to pick the right kind of model for how your data is going to be used at the rates and search and stuff such along the way. So it's an integration point for us and a great one.
Yeah, thank you for providing your perspective on this topic. And Mari or everyone else, if you've got any questions, just feel free to jump into the chat, and we will for sure ask them. But I would like to go once again to the business side of things, to the brand. So Aaron explained that we've got the concept of hot data or various data sources, various data data places where we actually want the data to store at the end. But from your perspective, when you speak with executives, with business owners, how do they look at data itself? Do they understand the concept of hot and cold data, or maybe you guide them through basically the whole process to explain not only the technical capabilities, but also the way that you should operate the IoT fleet?
So I would say a couple things there. One of the things that we hear from customers is that we've got too much data, meaning that we have such massive amounts of data that we don't know what to do with. We don't know how to get value out of. That's one thing that we hear. The other thing that we hear from customers when you start talking about data is they want to kind of just jump over the data part altogether and get to AI, right? We want to implement an AI solution, right? And so we'll talk with them about how really you've got to start with the data first, right? You've got to make sure that you have the correct data, that it's normalized, that you can make sense of it, that you can make use of it, and then you can act on it, right? So those are the things that that Clearblade can offer, to our customers. And again, it's typically what we see from kind of the more business-driven data discussions.
I mean, I'll add to that. One thing that we see a lot of is unlocking device data, obviously, because it's Internet of Things. So you've got data that's been siloed in these devices, and they can't get access to it in real time. And so we breathe new life into kind of very old devices. Some of these devices are 20, 30 years old. And when you can attach that to a Clearblade runtime and stream the data all of a sudden into, say, a ticketing system and automatically open a ticket and send an alert, that's huge value to a customer, because they're now saying, oh gosh, we've been waiting for 5-10 years to get this built, and now Clearblade's opened that up for us.
I think this is a great point about the legacy infrastructure, because if we are speaking about manufacturing, they do not use the latest, greatest hardware. Like, they don't want to totally change their production line every single year, right? So as you said, the capability that you can essentially attach your devices into whatever legacy solution they've got and unlock this data, I think this is a huge win. And actually, that brings me to the point that also is very, very important that you made, and it is a pretty strong statement. So you said that if you cannot show the return on investment in 30 days, you're in with the wrong vendor, and that is pretty hard pull off. And you've said that with so much of confidence that I think that you really mean it. So maybe you could give us some hits on this one.
Yeah, look, Internet of Things is hard, right? It's harder than anyone has imagined over the last decade, and we've mostly failed. I'm going to say, as an industry, as a movement, it's failed, and we've seen this time and time again. So I call these things IoT science experiments. We've been involved in some early days where you're building things and it's taking months and months, or typically years and years, to get to value. And we've got to stop the madness, in my opinion. So one of the things we focused on is like, look, Clearblade, we're very proud of our software, proud of our edge, proud of our cloud, and it's really advanced stuff. But what we also saw was, gosh, it still takes our customers too long to build a working system. And so we started investing and saying, okay, we built these great products. Why don't we build the application too? And let's target the operator, the end user, and not necessarily the computer science person or the programmer, because we already targeted that person. We've got all the tools, we've got all the bells and whistles to build. Well, now let's give the application, and that's really had a big impact, and that's what drives immediate ROI. We can show a customer configuration in a day or two, and then I'm very confident we can get to ROI value in 30 days with intelligent assets. So it's been a big push on our front, with our company, to really focus on the end user now, focus on deploying value, and stop building and start really giving customers software they can use out of the box.
So yeah, well, using out of the box, I think this is very, very important, because some users, especially users without IoT experience, they don't really understand the capabilities. So it's hard for them to define the requirements if they do not know the potential. So as I said, if you can provide something that on one end is not purely focused on IT stuff, because there are a lot of people that are in the operations. You mentioned the rail example. I love this one because it's extremely specific, very narrow domain, not necessarily the high-tech domain if we speak about operations. And yet they were able to adapt that solution to basically drive the value, to achieve outcomes from their own operations in very short amount of time. So let me go back to the person that was responsible for making that happen. And being a technical person myself, I know how hard it is to design a solution that should be operated by non-IT folks, right? Because your brain is just wired in a way that you think in APIs, abstractions, data arrays, whatnot, right? And those people operate totally differently. So how you manage to make that easy to use in the low code, no code manner for the end users?
Yeah, I always laugh at this when the question, how do you get there from here, right, or where you're at. We had an employee probably in 2015. We had a major release. We fixed a huge amount of performance. Suddenly we were showing millions of devices connecting, right? And the whole team was like, well, we're done. You know what I mean? Like, we've reached it. Like, this is anything anyone would ever need. And in that moment, I'm like, no, all it is now is we have to know how people are going to use this and what do they want for their final product. And it goes back to ROI, right? You have to actually work with some folks, help them get down their journey to find that ROI. And then you find yet another layer of commonality. I think, the vision that was set before us was great, because then it helped us get customers, right? We worked with a large mining customer, worked with an aerospace customer. We had a rail customer. We had an oil and gas customer. We had all these folks. We had a connected product. And ultimately what that helped us do was say, number one, we saw some competitive stuff in the marketplace. I'll pick on Node-RED. People like Node-RED. It's great. To me, it's not a production tool. And in the end, it's really hard to scale up and manage when things get super complex, right? So we ultimately really said we can't kind of go that pattern. We have to reach all the way to the end of the end user who's not technical. What is it they care about? They care about seeing their particular thing in their particular vernacular, and they want to put their process around it. So if you say their business terms, how they view it in their process, suddenly a lot of technology disappears. No one ever asks about a protocol again. No one ever asks about transmission. All that goes away. That's stuff that this technologist can take care of. And now you're presenting an interface of basically saying, tell me what you've got. How do you tell other people what's going wrong? Is it too hot? Is it running fast? What is the language you use? And so once we got our head around how we wanted to approach this for our end users, what is that end application? Then this kind of domain model, this abstract ability to put your logic into it, your understanding into it was built, right? And that is that application that Eric talks about, where literally you can go in, Brent goes in and says, what's the ROI we're after? Ultimately, we want to take an action when X happens. We want our customers to be able to see. We want to turn down the energy usage in this building, but we don't know where. As soon as you can articulate that ROI, now this no-code interface lets us go ahead and build that in their terms, their terminology. So, when the doohickey's running wobbly, right, could be the literal rule our customers write in us, because that is their business language, right? That would be a poor business language, but that's ultimately what it is. When the switch throws too fast is relative to their business. They can put all that behind the scenes, and now they're serving the operator. That's how we attack the ROI in 30 days. We go really, really after what is the action that makes sense for you. If you can put this into process, what's the value? And that's where our tools have led us, right? Tons of infrastructure, tons of developers being brilliant people, tons of scalability, tons of security that person doesn't care about. They just want to know it's there, but they want to make their asset show up and take the right action better, faster, more efficiently than they were before.
And Aaron, if I could just add, one of the things from a business perspective that I'm super excited about is that, the work you guys have done in building our Gen AI assistant into the intelligent assets application, right? So now a business user can use this chatbot to, say, add 15 trucks, and the Gen AI assistant will go out and, it will recognize common attributes that you want to measure for that particular asset and build those out within the application. So now with a few clicks and a few minutes, you've done something that before might have taken, an hour. So again, it's about time to value. What have we done? We've just reduced the time that it takes a customer to get set up with Clearblade and start seeing value from Clearblade. That's really exciting.
And just to add to this, what we saw was commonality across our various different customers, right? Whether they were tracking something that moved or monitoring something that was stationary, we were building, or they were building the same thing over and over and over. And we said, well, why don't we build one application that handles it all? I mean, a very, big undertaking, right? And kind of bold. But again, this goes back to these IoT science experiments I'm talking about. If we could build an application that's flexible enough that can change and fit the operator, right? Change the vernacular of the business that we're in, do it in a way that doesn't force you to drop into code, then you can deliver value to the business. And then typically what happens is then IT gets involved later, because they're like, why is the business using this product? We've been working on building it. And then IT gets involved and realizes, oh, wow, it's actually very open and developer friendly too. So we can now extend what we're doing with the business. So we've kind of hit both sides. And I think the industry needs more of this, more package applications that are open and flexible and allow the data to stream wherever the customer needs it to.
So you mentioned one very interesting topic, and that is that IT, that internal IT department, they might be not necessarily your biggest friend at the very beginning, because basically they might see you like a competitor. But then when they basically understand that you provide the capabilities, but they've got all the insights knowledge. And what Aaron said, if some switch is flipping too fast, what does it mean too fast, right? This is the domain knowledge that I do not know, like you don't know, you don't care. What you really care about is that you expose the interface for those domain experts to fill all of those data inside, and then all of a sudden the magic happens. So I
And we
think
don't
this.
force them into a corner, right? We don't say you have to run on this cloud, right? You can run it on any cloud that you want. Anywhere that runs Linux, which is every cloud, right? You can run it there. Do you want to run it on premise? Sure, run it behind your firewall. You want to run it at the edge? Great. You want to add edge in later because you don't have a vision for edge yet? Fine. You don't have to re-architect your system. You just start adding edges and distributed computing. So that, again, we use the F word a lot at Clearblade, flexibility, but it's whenever we ask our customers what thing is most valuable about Clearblade, it comes back as the flexibility. We can mold it into whatever we want it to be.
Now, speaking about internal IT departments, I've got a question to you, Eric. What's your take on the do-it-yourself IoT versus off-the-shelf products like Clearblade? Like do they
Yeah.
work?
Oh, I see the question too, DIY, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
So
exactly what we're up against. And I think it's a challenge in the industry because I say this, like my kids can go on and go on Amazon or Microsoft or Google, and they can connect a device and see data. So from that perspective, IoT looks really easy at the outset. It is. But the problem is DIY becomes not do it yourself, but disaster. I can't even think of in yearning. I don't know. It becomes really bad because it's really hard. When you go from one device or 10 devices to 500,000 devices, when I go from one protocol to 17 different protocols and different product sets, when I start looking at security, when I start looking at uptime, it gets very complex very fast, and even some of the smartest architects stumble. Look, we stumbled for years around this IoT thing until we really got it down, and so we've got 11 plus years dedicated to this and constantly updating our product, and we've got 250 plus customers around the world now with all different requirements. So maintaining an IoT system for that constituency is very challenging. And I've seen companies really waste 5-10 years trying to build this on their own. And I think we've got to get to more of a buy and integrate as opposed to a build from the ground up.
I'll chime in one time. I mean, this happens in our industry, right? I mean, once upon a time, no one vendor could represent my customer and how I want to relate to them. No one vendor can help me resource plan. I'm going to build it from the ground up. I'm going to take a database and application. Like, we've seen this. It takes people a while to understand, holy cow, we're all doing the same things, and here are the final points of variability. That's where we are in this journey, right? And that's why DIY is appealing, because people can go connect that one Bluetooth device and say, here business, here's some value. But understanding how it scales, interacts, how it integrates, new types of protocols, that's this spider web that becomes this very, very difficult to maintain disaster, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and I'll add to that, because our competition isn't other companies like Clearblade. Our competition is internal projects. And I actually sympathize with these folks. They're like, wait a minute, I've been hired to build this, right? And the real answer there is, well, you've been hired to be successful, and what you should be doing is not be married to your build from the ground up, but find a way to deliver value to the business, because there's plenty more to do, right? Look at the explosion of AI. If we can start focusing on some of the higher level things to give to the business and stop trying to build the plumbing, we'll all be better off, right? Leave that to folks like us that have beaten our head against this IoT rock for over a decade, and we're constantly innovating. That takes discipline. It takes focus. I'll also say it's why I think the hyperscalers are not that great at IoT, because they're focused on cloud. It's a very different thing to build and maintain a cloud than it is to build an IoT system. And I think those two need to work hand in hand. I think that separation of concerns is what's allowed us to be successful.
I think that's a great point. And on that do it yourself and POC, it is relatively easy to do the proof of concept, the POC, with a few devices. But then when you try to enter the scale, all of a sudden you see the challenges that were not there, where you had direct access to all of those devices. And in case of any issues, you could just manually reboot them, do some tweaking with the firmware, maybe with wiring, and it looked perfect, right? But then when you sell your products, your customers are not that happy if you will visit them every month just to do the firmware upgrade, for instance, right? So
And then we waste millions of dollars on development and years. And a lot of times they're solving some really hard problems. And a lot of times the end users are saying, I want this specific dashboard. And you spend all this money building 1,700 different versions of the same dashboard. And it's a really good business if you're a system integrator and I make money by the hour, but it's really not a good business if you're trying to drive ROI for your company.
Kind of blows up the whole time to value thing we've been talking about.
Yeah. And look, we used to do, I ran a services business before this. Aaron and I started as a services business, and then we said, we're going to build software. And so we know both sides of that. And it's very enticing to go and build all the time. It's very enticing to have some success early, but the maintenance tail on a custom built IoT system is ridiculous. And also in the end, you're going to end up throwing it away and starting over.
Yeah, the maintenance cost will eat your margins very often. So that's a great point. Speaking about switching from POC to the production, we've got a question from John about scalability. So I will handle that to Aaron. From technical perspective, what are the scalability limits or things that customers should be worried about?
Scalability tipping point. I'm not sure if we're talking about when the industry tips and everybody goes to the edge, kind of like we all swung to the PC movement when you had a client or whatever, or if we're talking about scalability where we actually want to, scale up our edge environments so that they can handle more and more processing. But I'll take a shot at kind of the technical side. Certainly the interesting thing about edge is it is putting constraints. Like the cloud is kind of unlimited, so to speak, right? So when you're talking about IoT platform, you design and architect that for just consume more resources. The edge is designed to be the opposite. Very often people are squeezing that capital cost as low as they can. They intend, if they buy more, they intend to put more and more processing on the future. And so ultimately you have to take that architecture in kind of a different mindset. Clustered edges working together, right? Mesh edges is a little messy, but the mesh edges, the idea that they work together and they share the workload. I can't run the rule now, so I'll share it with you and let you run that logic, that AI model. So on one hand, there are architecture design patterns. On the other hand, I think, you look at the business as scaling with edge. I think we're going to continue to see it kind of linearly roll. Maybe we'll see a lot of POCs begin to go from that 10 to 100. We have a couple thousand, maybe we have some 10,000 edges right now in good models. But where that scales, it's hard to say. You look at a company like NVIDIA, I'm sure they thought they had made it when they had the portion of the graphics card, and now they've found this whole new market that's out there. So I think edge will have a curve, a giant curve, as people understand new uses.
Yeah. What I'm seeing with edge is AI being the killer app for edge. Like we were always pushing edge, or then, at least, hey, look, you can use edge compute. And we had some very specific use cases was, hey, look, we want to get data off these railway systems and so forth. But now I think AI is got people really excited about edge, because now, like Lukas, you said, we should be running that AI model where the data is being generated or collected. And there's a business reason for this, not just a cool technical reason. We've had customers that have been running AI for decades, but they're running it in the cloud, and they've got to, one customer had to stream it across satellite. One, that's really expensive. Two, they couldn't use all the data that they wanted to, so that AI model was not as effective. Then they moved it to the edge, and they could use all that data coming off the site, terabytes of data, made the AI model much more effective, and it made it much more secure because the data wasn't leaving leaving the area. It wasn't leaving their devices. It didn't go to someone's cloud. It stayed local. And then you got more value out of the AI. It was more secure and it was more resilient. So it was running all the time. So I think we're going to see a lot more edge with the advent of AI.
Brent, what's your take on that from the business perspective regarding the scalability of the edge and then let's say improvement of the edge processing by utilizing AI capabilities?
Yeah, I think it's from a business and also a cost standpoint. I think customers are interested in this idea of, the more you move to the edge, the more processing you're doing at the edge, the less amount of data you're transmitting back to the cloud. You're reducing your cloud costs. You're reducing your communications costs, as I described with that one customer. So, I think that this idea of going back to this distributed model makes a lot of good business sense, and we're starting to see that from customers.
And I'll add another thing. I see edge kind of following the same pattern as IoT in general. There's a lot of DIY at the edge. There's a lot of movement of containers, but you're still building custom, what I would call point solutions for the edge. I think those will have its place, but I'd like to avoid this whole IoT science project dilemma again by saying, look, stop building your edge separately from your IoT platform. Start deploying the same. Start innovating that way, as opposed to building cool low-level stuff. I'm seeing it go the same way, and that concerns me because I think that will slow down the adoption of edge, because you need more than just an orchestration layer. You need an actual runtime at the edge.
So, speaking about the edge, I've got one topic that I would like to cover with you, because the edge capabilities, at the one hand, they open new business opportunities, but at the other hand, they kind of create a risk for the end users, for the consumers. Speaking about privacy, for instance. So how can we ensure that we leverage the edge capabilities, the AI, we utilize the cloud backend while respecting the end user's privacy? So this is pretty tough topic to address properly. And I know that you've got some good stories to share from the retail industry.
Yeah, I'll start with how do you ensure security, and the edge is probably how we are going to ensure security, right? As you think about what IoT does and what it unlocks, it's putting connectivity in places that didn't used to have it. So if you don't go in with the security mindset, and how are you going to front what are unsecure devices in a secure way, that's where the edge comes in. I think too, though, we just had a large data leak in the United States, and we saw in there a tremendous amount of data from 1980, right? I mean, there was a huge amount of data, private data from 40 years ago. And it really comes back to this data managed just to get out and be available. The edge is sort of our spot to say, wait a minute, maybe we don't put everything up, and we don't just make it sit around in places that can be grabbed. Video is one that concerns me, that lots of video is streaming to centralized places, because they're going to be hacks there. It's going to be found. It's going to be a treasure trove for somebody. And so when we look at it, the edge immediately can take away what might be the video feeds going saved to insecure locations, because you can process the video for what you want beforehand. You can keep that video in that local place. Sure, there's security requirements there, but now you don't have, 40,000 hours of 40,000 people. You've got individual locations, which creates a smaller attack surface for people, and a smaller value in terms of getting at that data. So for us, we see the edge. Let's process it. Let's do the AI on that real-time video feed. Let's understand that we had 5 people. Let's find that business ROI from the feed, right? Maybe the trespasser, maybe the unknown actor, maybe the gauge went too high. Let's derive that, but let's not leak all the privacy information. Let's not put people's faces just laying around in open S3 files. So that's where we look at it. The edge is our opportunity to get it right, and then to keep the attack surface smaller for the in general world all around.
And when you have customers that have their own networks that are locked down, you have the flexibility to put it behind those networks, run on their running their networks and prioritize things, it's a lot easier for them to buy into your software and then deploy it on sensitive infrastructure like U.S. railways, right? I mean, how do you get a customer to do that unless you're flexible enough to fit behind their security protocols and their firewalls that they've had for decades?
So yeah, Eric, that's a great point. And Lucas, it's a combination then of yes, we can leverage edge to increase data privacy, but also again have the flexibility to run the platform in a private data center that's completely disconnected from the internet. Solves that problem.
So this is the question that I've got to you, Brent, about the privacy and security in general. So how often do you see those concerns when you meet with business executives, right? Because as Aaron said, basically every week we see a major hack of high-profile IT system, IoT included. So personally, I see a huge concern in around the executives to connect really private or really high-profile systems into the IoT deployments, because they fear that they might get exploited. So do you see the same, and how do you address those fears of your customers?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely see that, and it's an important part of the discussion. It certainly depends on the use case, but like I'll give you an example. We have a retail customer who is leveraging Clearblade to ingest camera data, store camera data, to ultimately improve customer experience for the in-store customer. But they're collecting some potentially sensitive data with those camera feeds. I mean, facial recognition is one of the kind of the hot buttons you hear about. But again, going back to our earlier conversation, with the way that we've architected that solution, we have edge running in that store on a local server. There's AI mining the video data for critical events. We're not sending any of that personal data back to the cloud, right? So there's a process where everything runs on the edge, and then the edge alerts the store staff to go assist certain customers based upon what they're doing, right? So I mean that's one example. But again, I think if privacy, if you're talking about rail, which Eric mentioned, or you're talking about government use cases, again, it's the flexibility to be able to say, hey, this is a huge issue for you. The best way to address this is to run this in your private network.
So if you're connecting critical infrastructure for a government, we're involved in some of these projects. That's a number one concern, right? We need to be able to secure your software. We need to be able to put it anywhere, but we need to be able to have it check these boxes in terms of security and flexibility, and that's why we fit in a lot of those projects.
Okay, so let's wrap up with my favorite question that I also always ask, like your core messaging to people watching live or recorded video, that consider if IoT in general is a good fit for their business. Let's say they are not IT professionals, they are domain experts with their respective fields, and they would like to know what business value, what business potential can they achieve by leveraging IoT. And let's start with Brent, who is the customer's advocate during this call and in his daily activities.
So I think we've talked a lot about time to value in this session, right? I think value is the operative word there. When I think of what does that mean for a customer, I look at it from the standpoint of there's really three things, right? It's either has to be about cost reduction, cost avoidance, or revenue generation. So you could say time to cost reduction, time to cost avoidance, right? To give you maybe a little more clear picture of what the goals are. I think that if IoT is going to scale, if it's going to reach its potential, we have to get out of this very tech-driven custom build phase that we've been in for years, as we've talked about again in this session, and we've been failing at, and really start to focus now on the measurable business impact. That is how the teams that are working on IoT projects within companies, they can ensure their success because they're delivering results back to the business that are measurable and real. That's what we need to focus on.
Eric, over to you.
Yeah, I agree with Brent. We've got customers that are solving business problems. I want to remotely monitor my water purification process that goes into wineries or is being used for drinking water, and I want to do that remotely because it saves me a lot of money than having to drive a truck up to some very remote locations and check on equipment every day, right? So there's a good use case where you can deploy Edge, stream data, and then monitor all your locations from your home office, right? And only go out when there's alerts. We see a lot of that. So instead of this company going out and building a custom IoT solution, they were able to buy intelligent assets and configure it and deploy it in 30 days, less than 30 days, and get value. So I think my message to the industry is there's probably 70+% of you out there that are frustrated with IoT and is burned way too much money. I'd say try something that gets you value in 30 days. And if it doesn't, then fine, move on. But we've got to get to more of a buy and implement mentality as opposed to a build and build mentality.
So Aaron, I will modify my question a bit, asking yourself, from your perspective, do people need to be technical IT experts in order to fully leverage IoT capabilities and basically learn whatever you know about technology and designing solutions, or they can just focus on their business domain and leave the technology aside, don't really worry about it anymore?
Yes, I mean that is our goal, right? Our goal is to take on that burden and essentially provide. Let's get down to what you need to understand for your business, right? We always understand once customers get more involved, once the business is there, then there are other people that are going to want to help. They're going to want to innovate. And that's where our tools open up and they can really blossom in that environment. We provide that capability as well. But absolutely, we're providing that value. We're focused on that value right away. I think the last piece I'll throw out there is the expertise that Clearblade has today, and maybe you're building yourself in your DIY. Man, this thing is changing fast, right? I mean, everyone's like, one day we'll have an IoT protocol. No, we're not. We're going to have 10 new, more great ones, right? One day we're going to have one type of connectivity. No, we're not. We're going to have low Earth orbit. We're going to have long range. We're going to have all these new things continue, right? And that's where I think Clearblade, why we can stand up to this day, is we continue to be able to bring this new stuff in and provide it back to the business. The business doesn't have to go try to understand what long range, low power frequencies they need to use. They're all available in the bag that they have with Clearblade. And so that's where we sit. We want to continue to adopt those new technologies and bring them in and bring them right back to business value each time.
I think that's a great summary. Unfortunately, very true that the complexity, the technical complexity of the Internet of Things will grow. This is my perspective as well, that we will find some better ways to implement some things. We will find maybe some totally new types of hardware, AI, whatever, right? But from the business perspective, the value should be always there. So this concludes our today's session and the whole One Clear Thing series. Please share your feedback with us if you liked it, what you liked about the series, what you like about this live session. Maybe there are things that you would like us to improve. Let us know. This is something that we really want to be better at, and we want to meet your requirements. So please contact Clearblade team directly if you want to start cooperation, or maybe if you just want to learn if Clearblade is a good fit for you. So that's all from my side. Thank you so much for the whole Clearblade team. Thank you for everyone watching us live. If you watch recording, thank you as well. Until next time, I'm the host, Łukasz Malinowski, and see you on the other side.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Really fun.